there could be real playoff implications for Oregon when they go to Wisconsin in November.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ryan Harings, Locked On Wisconsin Badgers, joining me here on today's show. If Oregon were to lose to both Ohio State and Michigan, which is not something I foresee happening, both games are under a field goal, though. It's not impossible, given what Vegas thinks about the teams. This matchup with Wisconsin, Ryan, would suddenly be Oregon playing for their playoff lives, because I don't think there's another game on the schedule that they could lose. And if they go to Wisconsin and win, and then they come home the following week and beat Washington, they're sitting at 10-2. That's a good place to be. But if they then lose this game at Wisconsin, after having already lost to Ohio State and Michigan, then this Wisconsin game would be the one you look back and say, well, that's one of the ones that Oregon that made Oregon miss the playoff. How good is this Wisconsin team going to be in 2024?
Yeah, that's a great question. You ask a lot of Badger fans that, and you get kind of I don't know. That last year's team was supposed to be the hype around it with Luke Fickell coming in with a pretty weak schedule was supposed to be a pretty good team, a 9-10 win team. That's what the expectations were. It were the odds-on favorite to really come out of that division. This year, it's a little bit more wait and see. Still a transfer quarterback coming in. Last year's Tanner Mordecai. This year, it's Tyler Van Dyke. There's a lot of just question marks. Now, one thing Luke Fickell has talked about, not just in media days, but over the course of the offseason, is leadership and culture. When he came to Wisconsin, I think there was a perception that he thought the cupboard was a little bit more full than it was, and he didn't want to completely rock the boat. He's kind of, I think, in my opinion, he's kind of ripped that up and thrown it out this offseason. Like, we're going to establish what we did at Cincinnati. What got Cincinnati to the playoffs is what we're going to start doing here. It's not disrespectful to what Wisconsin has been in the past, but it's time to put my stamp on this program. I think it's going to be a good team. They really revamped the defensive speed, added 5 transfer linebackers. That was a big weakness on the team last year. Being able to cover on the edges, being able to cover in space, being able to track down mobile quarterbacks. They've really, this offseason, prioritized that, brought in a lot of talent. But it's still going to come down to Tyler Van Dyke. Ultimately, unless you have an incredible team everywhere, your quarterback is the driving force. How good will Tyler Van Dyke be? Early returns, it sounds like over the course of the summer, he's really started to take that leadership role they want him to do. This is a guy Phil Longo, offensive coordinator, targeted. They want a bigger, strong quarterback, a bigger arm, push the ball downfield. Ultimately, though, he's had issues with consistency, with accuracy, with decision-making. So a lot of it depends on what Tyler Van Dyke does, and I don't think anybody knows for sure what that's going to look like in Madison.
When I look at this Wisconsin team and think about, the program they have been, one of the highest floor programs in all of college football. Wisconsin's up there, Utah's up there, Oklahoma State is up there. These are just teams and programs that are at the very least good or competent every year, which is one of the reasons I've highlighted this Wisconsin matchup as maybe Oregon's biggest trap game. They have a bye the following week, but their next opponent will be Washington, and there will be a lot of Oregon returners that have eyes for revenge in that game, but you can't overlook this trip to Madison. Now, the betting line currently is at Oregon around a 10.5-point favorite, which was slightly bigger than I thought, given that they are in Camp Randall rather than in Autzen Stadium. Why do you think the betting markets like Oregon more? And, I think Oregon has one of the best rosters in all of college football. That's just to be a double-digit road favorite means they think the gap between these two teams is pretty sizable. Oregon fans probably know by now why Oregon's roster is so good and why they're getting so much preseason hype and attention. But where do you feel like the Wisconsin roster shortcomings still are?
Yeah, really good question. A couple things you talked about that I want to highlight. You talked about revenge for Oregon's side. Wisconsin fans are still upset about the 2020 Rose Bowl. Not that will have any impact whatsoever on this game.
Oh, man.
We're still salty.
That was a good one.
Right?
That was a good one. At least for Oregon fans, that was a good one.
Was it? So Badger fans are still a little salty there. I would say when you look at that line, it comes down to a couple things. Wisconsin, you hit on it, the consistency of the program. It's the third longest bowl streak in the country. Georgia leads the way. I think Wisconsin's third on that list, which is an incredible accomplishment. But you look back at the last 3-4 years, and Wisconsin hasn't really had a marquee win. They've had opportunities against Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. They've had a lot of Notre Dame. They've had a lot of chances, and they continually have fallen short in those marquee games against teams that have better athletes on the edges, right? And that's still going to be an issue against Oregon. Oregon has a better roster top to bottom, much more depth on the defensive line, which this is a later season game. The more depth you have in the trenches, that's an area Wisconsin has struggled in. They're still a little light there this year. They're rebuilding. The longer the season goes, the more that depth in the trenches matter. And then I think it goes back to the first part of what we talked about is quarterback driven. You look at what Oregon has in the quarterback room, what they did this offseason, and then you compare and contrast that to Tyler Van Dyke, who is a big kind of question mark enigma. Could he hit? He has an NFL arm and NFL size, absolutely, but we've also seen the lows. And I think you look at the depth on the trenches on both sides of the ball, and then you look at the quarterback situation. To me, it's a tick high. Camp Randall, if Wisconsin is good, is not the easiest place to play, but I would have expected an 8-9 point spread. So it's not that far off from what I would have expected.
When I think about Wisconsin teams over the years, I think of Melvin Gordon. I think of Monte Ball. I think of all the great running backs that they have had come through. Just a traditional, kind of Michigan-style I formation lineup, like a very classic Big Ten team. With Luke Fickell, what is the identity of this Wisconsin Badgers program?
Yeah, you can take that old smash mouth I form, 2 tight ends, fullback, and throw that out the window. They are air raid now. Phil Longer brought that in from his time at North Carolina, also his time at Ole Miss. And defensively, they've become a little more multiple. So traditionally, Jim Leonard, going back to Dave Aranda when he's the defensive coordinator, this Badgers defense was a really good 3-4 base. They would still mix things around because every defense does now. Mike Tressel coming over, background at Michigan State, what he did at Cincinnati, it's going to be more multiple, more 3-3-5, 2-4-5 or 2-4-6, that kind of stuff. They want to get more linebackers in space, create more havoc. I think what you'll see is a tendency to give up maybe a few more big plays, but also to be more disruptive, more sacks, force more turnovers. That's really what they're moving towards. So a lot of the cultural principles of Wisconsin, Luke Fickell embodies. He's a Midwest guy. He was a wrestler. So that toughness, that culture, that ability to win in the trenches, he still believes in all that. Those are always hallmarks of Wisconsin. But schematically, how they're doing it is far different from what Paul Chryst, Brett Bielema, Barry Alvarez did.
Last thing for you, Ryan. What sort of chance would you give Wisconsin of pulling an upset in this game? It's one that I feel very confident in Oregon's ability to win. I just can't shake the road factor. Vegas being as confident as they are gives me a little bit more confidence there. But when you look at this game, are you chalking it up as, in Wisconsin land, as this is a loss, there's no chance of this happening? Or if things go the way that Badger fans hope, can you see Wisconsin being capable of playing at Oregon's level?
Yeah, I mean, I've chalked this up as a loss. So we've gone through the schedule. A lot of people have. I feel like this is the Badgers' toughest game of the year, even being at home. They have an early season tilt against Bama, but it's very early. And Bama is still a new coaching staff, a lot of kind of roster turnover there. I think it's a monumental task when you look at the roster, what Oregon has, what they've built the last couple of years. I think Lanning's a phenomenal coach. I don't think it's impossible, right? This is not like Appalachian State, Michigan. It's not like Stanford, USC back when Harbaugh turned that Stanford program around, was a 42-point underdog.
I love that reference so much. That is a great upset reference. Well done. Well done.
Amazing game. Amazing game. But it's not like that. Like if Wisconsin wins a game in Camp Randall that's tight, maybe Oregon has a turnover or two, no one's going to come away shocked. Like, oh my gosh, Oregon lost in Camp Randall. Can you believe this? No, that's absolutely possible. There is a scenario here, and I mentioned it, where Phil Longo, who has a tradition of getting a lot out of big arm quarterbacks, unlocks something in Tyler Van Dyke. Miami was not the best ecosystem for a quarterback the last couple of years, let's be honest. So there's a chance Wisconsin, Longo, Van Dyke unlock something, and they really made great strides revamping their defense this year. In the offseason, at least we'll see, but that it looks like they did. It could happen, but I have this down as a very tough game. I have Wisconsin losing it. Being at home, potential 3:30 start could help. That's a lot of travel for Oregon, obviously. Still, like the roster difference matters, the quarterback difference matters. So I think Oregon wins, and it is the toughest game I have on Wisconsin's schedule.
I don't think you'll find disagreement amongst Oregon fans about Tyler Van Dyke coming from Miami, having been in a more challenging quarterback system. I think you'll find mostly agreement there. Ryan Harings, Locked On Badgers. Ryan, appreciate the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Got a very special interview guest that you will not want to miss coming up next. We're going to get to that after we get to Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, both of which are good for you. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Pretty neat. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time just takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60%. That's over half. Last time that I checked, my math is not always perfect though, but I'm pretty sure it's right. When you buy last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals ahead of the game or event. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. That's a Big 10 second segment sip right there. Is that different than a Pac-12 second segment sip? Not really. For those who are watching for the first time this week, I am indeed in Indianapolis at Big 10 Media Days, hence the Big 10 logos behind me here on the banner where I'm recording the show. You got UCLA over there, classic Big 10 team. You got Purdue over there, actual Big 10 team. Do we all know who the R is? Gosh, I hope so, because that's Oregon conference opponent Rutgers. Yeah, same conference. Now, all that was pretty crazy, but one of the perks of being here, sometimes you run into people and you can catch them for an interview. And I had the great privilege of catching up with Brad Nessler, CBS Sports play-by-play announcer, the SEC for a long time now. Because CBS has the Big 10, this is one of Oregon's primary national TV play-by-play announcers, and I'm stoked about that. I've been a big fan of Brad Nessler's for a long time. On a personal note, this was one of the coolest interviews I've gotten to do. I didn't have stuff to record a stand-up, and the environment didn't really allow for that, so it's just audio, but it sounds great. Brad was awesome, and he has a callback in here to a moment Oregon fans will know exceptionally well. So, here we go. Brad Nessler, CBS Sports, joining me here at Big 10 Media Days in Indianapolis. What was your reaction going from the SEC over to the Big 10? And now you're in the same conference as Oregon as an announcer for games you're going to be covering. Did you ever think that would happen?
No, I never thought in a million years it would happen because, I was just telling you before we started talking here. When I was starting out, the Big Ten was the Big Ten, and now it's 18 teams and it's coast to coast. I've done Oregon games, but it's obviously another network and a while back. But Coach Lanning's done an unbelievable job, and we knew him so well from Georgia, and we knew he was going places in a hurry at his age, And what they've done, they had 2 3-point games last year, or they'd have been in the championship. And I think this year they're thinking it's a championship or bust. And with the roster they got, the receivers they've got, they've already done well in the transfer and the quarterback situation with Bo, and I think it'll pick right up with Dylan. So I think they should be considered a co-favorite probably in the Big Ten, or obviously going to make playoff. It would be a major stumble if they didn't make the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. What was the last Oregon game that you did call? Do you remember?
Oh, wow. No, I don't. I remember I blew a call, though. I think Chip...
You always remember the bad ones.
I know. I think Chip was probably the coach. And I think we even did him in a bowl game, and Chip was the coach before he left for the NFL, so I don't know who that would have been. But
Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State, maybe?
That might have been it. I think that was it. But, I had a bad call because the camera angles at wherever we were. I don't know if it was Oregon at home or away, but there was a guy. Oh, I know what I did. So the guy's scoring a touchdown, or I think he's scoring a touchdown, and he did one of those drop the ball at the half-yard line.
Oh.
And the Oregon defender picked it up and went 99 and a half yards the other way. And I didn't get the drift until he was about 60 yards downfield. And Holly Rowe is screaming at our producer, the ball's going the other way. And Gary...
Oh, you were on the Utah game.
Was that it?
Yeah,
was it Utah?
the Kalen Clay.
Oh,
Kalen Clay.
I blew that so bad. I mean, you got to follow through on what's going on. And
Well, I mean, you get caught up in the excitement of the crowd.
And then the crowd
Right.
was in front of me, and there was arms in front of me and everything. I'm not trying to make an excuse, but everybody was standing up, and I'm like looking down, going, he's going the other way. I don't get it. And so anyway, I start calling the play.
Right.
I get him to the end zone, but I still don't know that it's a touchdown, and I don't know why the ball was scooped up on the other end.
Yeah.
So that's the last time I done an Oregon game, probably.
Well, hopefully nothing that crazy.
No, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, we don't.
Please.
Yeah, no, we don't want that. But yeah, you were with Blackledge for that game. Yeah, that moment resurfaces on my Twitter timeline like once a week.
You know,
just because it was just the craziest thing. It shifted the game too. Like I think Oregon ended up winning by like 20, but the difference between trailing 14-0 and tied 7-7.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it was. But bringing it back to 2024, the prospect of going out to Eugene for a game.
Yeah.
Those games that we just mentioned you did for Oregon weren't in Eugene. What have you heard about Autzen Stadium? Have you called a game there?
Yeah, I've called
before?
a game there. I don't remember when it was. You're probably going to ask me, and I'm not going to say it was Dan Fouts and Bobby Moore, Ahmad Rashad. It wasn't. I'm not that old, but I've done a game out there, and I love the atmosphere out there. I mean, the crowd is sensational. One of the best places. Yeah, I hope we get out there. We don't know our whole schedule yet, so hopefully we'll get out that way for sure.
Right. Going into this new look conference and covering all the different teams, are there other places that you're really excited to go to that, you wouldn't have gotten the chance to had everything stayed the way it was?
I've been to all of them. The only place I haven't been is Notre Dame to do a game, and I've never worked for NBC. So I've done a game every place this new Big Ten has been, and I've done every Power 5 school and many more. So, there's places that I like to go to. I like going to Madison. I got a lot of friends in Wisconsin, just stuff like that. So I have different places that, I enjoy more probably socially than the game itself. But, the big house.
That's part of the whole experience, right?
Yeah. Penn State Whiteout, did one last year, and somebody just asked me that a little while ago, said, you've never done a Penn State Whiteout game until last year. I said, no, I've done like 4 of them, so get to see some old places and some old friends and some places that I haven't been to in a while, so I'm looking forward to it.
When you look at this Big Ten conference and where Oregon fits into it, most media polls do have them picked second in the preseason. Do you think that will, kind of rub some people the wrong way that there's this newcomer they're coming in?
No,
from,
I think that's the fun part.
Conference?
I think that's the fun part. People are going to look at it and go, okay, Oregon, Big Ten, you did well where you were. Now can you go into what people would think is a different style of football? But I don't think Oregon's a different style of football. I think they're more SEC Big Ten than people don't realize, just because you think all the different uniforms and it's Nike and it's,
or a
it's
giant
Oregon.
Inflatable duck on the river.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it takes. But hey, all that stuff, when you get down to it, they got the horses. They got on defense. They've got 2 great receivers, a great coach that I hope stays there a long time, and they'll be in the thick of it for sure.
I know Oregon fans certainly hope he stays there for a long time. We got a good scare with that.
That's
in
right.
the offseason. I think we've had enough of that.
I think he digs where he is right now.
As he says, the grass is damn green in Eugene. That was on a T-shirt in about 30 seconds after he made that quote. Brad Nessler, CBS Sports. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Metro.
I think Brad's genuine excitement for the new teams coming in the league and the venues and whatnot. At first I thought I thought it was very sincere, and I thought it was great. I mean, talking to him, he seems to be really, really glowing about everything that is coming his way. As an announcer, he gets to see all this sort of stuff, and hopefully he gets out to Eugene. One of the best all-around play-by-play guys in the country. And as you can imagine, in the jobs that I have, that's something that I think about pretty regularly, is who the broadcast crew is going to be and who's going to be on it, whether or not I like them, and are they just okay. But I know Brad has always been top tier. But at first I thought the last game he did for Oregon, because he said when Chip was the coach, was the 2012 Fiesta Bowl against Kansas State, but I forgot that he was there for that Kalen Clay call. And Boy, that was a heck of a day. And that play singularly changed the way that I watch college football games, because anytime a guy breaks free and runs for a long touchdown, anytime the ball drops, I'm drawn right back to it because I remember it so very vividly. But that was one of my favorite interviews ever. I've had the good fortune of interviewing a lot of cool people so far in my life, and hopefully that trend will continue as I progress throughout the industry. But that one was great, and I thought Brad was awesome. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB, or at Locked On Ducks are the handles. Those are ways to get in the mailbag as well. And if you want priority access in the mailbag and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. Keep the questions coming. Oregon takes the stage today, actually, as you're listening to or watching this show. And I'm going to get to, hopefully, should be able to talk to Dylan Gabriel, Jeff Bossa, Terrence Ferguson, and Dan Lanning throughout the day. And I'll have Eric Skopel, 24/7 Sports, on the show tomorrow. So plenty of stuff coming your way, including on today's show. Guess what? Oregon's got a big recruiting weekend this weekend, even though Lanning is here in Indianapolis. And there's a name Oregon fans have got to be watching for in the 2025 class, because one guy might be flipping. That's coming up next. So Dan Lanning will be here in Indianapolis this week, and simultaneously, I presume, his coaching staff is getting ready back in Eugene for Saturday Night Live this weekend. Big recruiting opportunity for the Ducks. A lot of 2026 or 27 names. There are a couple, I think, from 2025, but this is really starting to lay a foundation for Oregon's 2026 high school recruiting class. But the latest buzz on the trail, Justin Hopkins and others have reported that Tennessee is working very hard to flip Oregon 4-star tight end commit Deshaun Brame. And it's either Deshaun or Deshaun. I'm not entirely certain as to which. I've heard it go both ways. But if Oregon lost Brame, that'd be a concern for two reasons. Number one, he's currently the only 2025 commit at the tight end position, and every other tight end that Oregon has offered has already verbally committed elsewhere. So you would either have to work to flip a guy like Lincoln Cure or Caleb Edwards, who Oregon were in for both of those guys that went to Kansas State and Alabama respectively, or you're stuck going the portal route. And the tight end is a position group that I think Oregon wants to have at least one high school player in the 2025 class, and I think that's a good spot to be from a recruiting standpoint for two reasons. Number one, you want to have diverse talent. You want to bring in, balanced classes. But number two, you look at Oregon's tight end room for 2025, and you've got Kenyon Sadiq, who I think will be ready to be Oregon's starting tight end next year. I mean, his athletic profile is really not like any Oregon tight end I can remember, with the number of different ways he can be incorporated into an offense. There aren't that many tight ends you can line up in the backfield and have them, operate effectively in there. But he is also a guy that didn't have a big role last year. I think has a bigger role this year, and next season probably pops and is Oregon's number one player at the position. But as we've seen in the last couple of years, you got to be able to go 2, 3, or even 4 deep at the tight end spot. And true freshmen have been contributing at this position for each of the last couple of seasons. And I mean, even go back to 2021. Maliki Montavau and Terrence Ferguson both played pivotal roles in the Oregon offense as true freshmen. Montavau had, I think, the last touchdown that Oregon scored at Ohio State. So this is a position group that is going to thin out, because after this year, Terrence Ferguson's going to the NFL. Patrick Herbert is out of eligibility. I'm sure he'll find a way onto, I would think, at least a practice squad. I mean, just put the blindside block against Washington State on tape and then let everybody's imagination run wild. But you're going to lose your top 2 guys. Sadiq is poised to fill that role. But I look at Deshaun Brame as someone that absolutely has the potential to come in 2025 and contribute and have the opportunity to do so. Oregon's got 2 tight ends in the class of 2024. AJ Pugliano and Roger Saliapaga, who is a converted wide receiver. He's a bigger body and such, kind of that Trayshawn Holden, Kyler Casper sort of mold, and the expectation is that he's going to play tight end. Now, I think those guys have very real upside. Pugliano's a little bit more of a traditional tight end, but both guys are very athletic. But having Brame in there is Oregon's only option, it appears, unless they can flip somebody else. Either Edwards from Alabama or Cure from Kansas State are the recruitments that they were most heavily in on. There were other players that they offered, but nobody else. Nate Roberts, who is committed to Ohio State, maybe, but I don't think the connection was as strong. Edwards and Cure and Brame have been kind of the top options, and Oregon having Brame right now, I think, is a good place for them to be. Do they need to get a second tight end? No, I don't think so. You can find, a depth piece at the tight end position via the transfer portal. I don't know about a starter though. A lot of players go in the transfer portal. Every position's available. Think about the number of impact transfer tight ends that have hit the portal in the last couple of years. Benjamin Jurasik went from Stanford to Georgia. I think he's going to be a stud for the Bulldogs this year. That's the only one I can really think of. There are a lot of, like, Carson Ryan went from UCLA to Utah. He's going to be the number 2 tight end. Matavau went from Oregon to UCLA. He was the number 2 or 3 tight end. Again, a player. Oregon got Casey Kelly from Ole Miss. Played, had a role. Don't see a lot of high-end players. Why? I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't know why that's the case. I just know that it is. So definitely watching for Saturday Night Live and the players that Oregon's after. Speaking of tight ends, Brock Harris, a guy out of my neck of the woods back in Utah in St. George. He's a 5-star in the class of 2026. He's on campus. So too is Michael Terry III, 2025 5-star athlete. That's probably the biggest name now to watch if Brame flips, because Terry is a guy that has tremendous positional versatility. He is an athlete on his position profile on 24/7 Sports. He can truly play multiple spots, and tight end could be one of them. So if Brame ends up flipping to Tennessee, which would be Oregon's, I think, just 2nd or 3rd decommitment of the 2025 cycle, then Michael Terry III becomes the name that could most readily just slide in and fill that position need in the 2025 class. So that's definitely a name to watch. Brock Harris as well, just because I think Harris is a really intriguing prospect. He'd be coming in at the same time as Gatlin Bair, 2024 Oregon 5-star receiver commit, who's on a 2-year mission. He'll be back in 26. You bring in Harris and Bair together, you're going to have some really, really strong pass catchers there for the Ducks. But Saturday Night Live is this weekend. We'll see if Oregon picks up any commitments coming out of it. I have said and continue to think, I think the Ducks are probably going to have at least 5 more players commit in the 2025 class. They're at 16 verbal commitments right now, and I expect that number to get over 20. How far over? They've had a couple of good recruiting classes in 23 and 24 coming into this year. So do they need to have a 27-player class? No, but do I expect them to get over 20? I would think so by the time the first National Signing Day comes around on December, or in December. I don't remember what day specifically it is, but the class for the most part is going to be finished up by the time the season starts, because once the season begins, you really only get maybe 1 or 2 players that'll commit to the Ducks. Let's wrap up with a question here from John. Again, YouTube comments, X, subtext, all ways to get into the mailbag. Subtext, you get priority access with a free 14-day trial. The Big Ten is full of rich history and traditions that we will now get to be a part of. What type of traditions could we start? They have the Little Brown Jug, the Paul Bunyan Trophy, the Golden Axe, and the Gold Pants are just a few that come to mind. Well, I think the only game that Oregon could start a new tradition with is Washington. That's their only protected matchup every year. I think they'll play one of the LA schools every season. I don't suspect that Oregon is going to, create something like that, because they haven't needed to at this point. I think the tradition that Oregon brings into the Big Ten, or the rivalry factors, that Washington game is going to be huge. It'll be the last game of the regular season that Oregon plays going forward, because it's going to be their biggest conference rival. I don't think you need a trophy or anything for that. I think Big Ten fans just just need to watch the game and experience it and feel how big that game is to both fan bases. And certainly I don't have to tell all of you listening or watching out there what that game means to you every year. And Washington fans are, on cloud nine the last couple of seasons because they've finally gotten over the hump and been able to beat Oregon consistently. We'll see if Jedd Fisch is able to do that. But, I'm excited for Big Ten fans to, travel to Autzen Stadium and experience Shout. I think that is, the most uniquely Oregon tradition that is very college football-esque. You wouldn't find something like that really in the NFL. I think when they see that happen, they're going to look around and go, oh yeah, this is cool. This is cool. It's like Wisconsin's jump around, which is also a great tradition. And I think that is enough. I don't think they need to add anything there. But, I think the game day experience at Autzen, hearing the crowd and watching Shout take place, I think that's all awesome stuff. Tomorrow, I'll have all the reaction to anything and everything Dan Lanning say, and hopefully I'll have some audio, and Dylan Gabriel, Jeff Bossa, Terrence Ferguson, everything you'll need. Make sure you tune into tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.